Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present LChayim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and there are many talented writers and journalists in the state of Israel. And one of the most talented is a journalist and author, Yossi Melman, who for some 27 years worked for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz as its intelligence and strategic affairs correspondent. Currently, Yossi writes for the Jerusalem Report and a number of other publications, and he's co-authored several books dealing with Israeli intelligence and spies and the Israeli establishment, including The Master Terrorist, The True Story of Abu Nidal, Imperfect Spies, The History of Israeli Intelligence, and he's written two books co-authored with Dan Raviv of CBS News, whom you've met here on LChayim. And one of the books Yossi and Dan wrote together was entitled Every Spy a Prince, The Complete History of Israel's Intelligence Community, and more recently, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars, published by Levant Books. And it's a fabulous book that chronicles the truth behind some of the most well-known of Israeli intelligence operations. And Yossi Melman, thank you so much for joining us at this table.
Thank you, Mark. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You're going to be speaking, by the way, as we meet now, you're going to be speaking shortly with Dan Raviv at the 92nd Street Y.
Yes.
And you're going to be speaking about the book and about Israeli intelligence, yes?
Yes, and Israeli security and Middle East politics.
The whole thing.
Most, yeah.
Okay. What's the message, Yossi, the overarching message you hope to convey to American audiences and American Jewish audiences as you speak at the Y? You're going down to Washington. You'll be in various venues speaking with Dan and really explaining what the Israeli scene is about. What's for you the overarching message that you wished more Americans and American Jews understood about Israel today?
Well, I'm a writer. I'm not a messenger. I'm trying to convey the idea, the notion that the security of Israel is at stake. It's very complicated. Situations in the Middle East is one big havoc, and Israel is is in the margins of it, but also at the middle of the of what's happening around Israel, and that it's very complicated.
Yossi, are you worried for the future of the state of Israel?
No, I'm not worried. I think Israel is a strong country. Certainly the most strongest army in the region. It has the most advanced technologies, industries, talented people. Therefore, I'm not worried about the future of Israel. I think Israel is pretty safe and its existence is being ensured. But there are a lot of troubles ahead of Israel because of what's going on around Israel, not because of the domestic situation in Israel.
Give me one or two of the most. American Jews assume you're referring to Iran, for example.
Iran is one example.
How serious is the Iranian threat to get a nuclear bomb?
Well, the Iranian threat is not merely that that country would have nuclear weapons. They are already on the verge of having they have a nuclear capability. I believe that if they want to have a bomb, to assemble the bomb, they are short of 3-4 months from the bomb. So but the problem with Iran is that it also sponsors and supports terrorist groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, the Islamist Palestinian movement, Hamas in Gaza. They are interfering in regional matters. So Iran is posing a threat to Israel, but not only to Israel. The Arab nations around Israel, Saudi Arabia, for example, Egypt, Jordan. They are very much concerned about the Iranian operations and activities and their efforts to make inroads into the region. So that's one threat or a danger facing Israel. But
don't leave that one for a moment. Most people are concerned and hope that Iran never develops the capability for creating a nuclear bomb, nuclear weapon.
they have it already.
You say it's already done.
Almost.
Almost.
Yes. They're still lacking some elements of the program.
But your sense is if they want it, they'll have it.
Yes.
Okay. Will Israel try to stop them?
Israel has tried to stop
Will they
them.
try to stop them militarily? There's talk about an Israeli strike against Iran.
I-
Is it realistic?
No, I doubt it very much.
Because?
Because it's a complicated situation. First of all, there is a debate within the Israeli security establishment about the wisdom of striking Iran. There are serious people who are against such a strike. Then you have the international arena that you have to take into consideration, mainly the relations with the United States. And after that, you also need to consider what are your capabilities. Are these capabilities sufficient enough to inflict a serious damage to Iran's nuclear structure?
Right. Are they? Is Israel equipped to give such a blow to Iran that it would delay for any significant length of time or destroy Iran's capability of constructing a nuclear weapon?
The Israeli Air Force is capable of inflicting serious damage to some of Iran's nuclear facilities, especially the crucial ones. For how long it would delay the Iranians, no one knows. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And then there are people who are asking the question, is it worth doing it, delaying it only for 3 years? So therefore, I doubt it very much that Israel would strike, especially now when there is this negotiations between the United States and the Western European nations, Russia and China, and they are very close to sign a comprehensive deal.
When Dan sat with me, and I really love your book, it's written wonderfully, and it tells stories in a way that American Jews normally don't get to read. And we'll get to some of the stories in a moment. But one of the things I said to him is, how in the world were you able to get people to talk to you the way they talk to you? And what Dan said to me is, understand, that's Yossi. That's not my strength. Yossi has the contacts. He knows everybody, and he's able to talk to everybody. So my question on Iran is in that context. When you talk to the people you talk to, do they blame the United States for this dilemma? Do you hear other Israeli people in intelligence and in the military circles say, if there had been a different president in the White House, Iran never would be this close, months away at any time? Or is that whole, it's Obama's fault, which you hear a lot in the American Jewish community, is that really missing, a misunderstanding of the entire arc of this problem?
Well, first of all, Dan is very modest. He contributed to this book, at least as I did. Okay. I do hear the criticism of this administration. And the most important one is that the Americans jumped too early to negotiate with Iran. Iran was on the verge of collapsing. Iran was economically suffocated. And in a way, by offering them the negotiations, I'm not against the negotiations. I'm not a warmonger. Negotiations and peace is always better than military strikes. But if this administration would have waited another few months, the Iranians would have crawled to have a deal. And I think it was prematurely to negotiate with them at this stage.
So relaxing the sanctions is the mistake?
Well, the sanctions haven't been lifted. But by the mere fact that you negotiate with them at this moment, and both sides know that the negotiations would eventually result in a comprehensive deal. At the moment, we have just an interim agreement. By doing it, you already offered the Iranians an exit plan. Had the negotiation waited a few more months, the West position, and certainly Israeli position, would have been much better, and the Iranians would be ready to make more concessions than they are at the moment, because they are on the verge of economically collapsing. That's why they decide. That's why the supreme leader Ali Khamenei, who is calling the shots in Iran, is the supreme leader. Everything is under control and under his wishes. He decided that he doesn't want anymore the previous president, who was causing Iran a great deal of problems, image problems, but also real problems, economic problems with his economic policy.
You're talking about Ahmadinejad.
Yes, Ahmadinejad. And he decided that we need to change, to have a more softened president, a new nice face, radiating, smiling to the West. And that was a result of the sanctions. Iran suffered from the sanctions. And what the regime feared was that eventually the people would turn against the regime because of the economic situation.
Do you feel that Rouhani is any different in terms of policy than Ahmadinejad was?
No, it's a cosmetic plastic surgery.
Just cosmetic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because he's not making the decisions. It's the supreme leader who is the making. But since he has been elected and approved by the supreme leader, it means that the supreme leader now wants slightly a different policy.
But it's a different face.
Yes.
Not necessarily different substance.
No, no. The substance remains the same. The regime is not going to change. Is not going to be more at the heart of the matter. At the core issues is not going to be different.
I didn't ask you yet. Do you have a family of your own?
Yes.
What do you have? What's your family constellation? Who's in your family?
I'm married.
Yes.
And my wife is a professor at Tel Aviv University, history professor.
Lovely. Children?
Two.
Two children.
One daughter now serving still in the army.
Yes.
And a son.
Very nice. No grandchildren yet?
Not yet.
Okay. At night, do you and your wife worry for the safety of your children because of the potential of Iran's having a nuclear weapon?
No, because we know that Israel is strong, and I think the image of Iran and the strength of Iran has been inflated, exaggerated. And in that sense, the Iranians they conducted, even if they didn't mean to do it, it was unintentional, but they managed to conduct a psychological warfare, persuading the world that they are, strong, and they remind me sometimes of the neighborhood bully. He's boasting about you better don't mess with me and all that, but eventually he's not that strong. And this is Iran. Iran has been on the verge of collapse. It has a strong military, but on the other hand, they couldn't buy any serious good equipment because of the sanctions. Their air force is outdated by 30 years. They are flying American, US-made F-4 Phantoms. They are no longer in service, neither in America nor in Israel. Therefore, no, I'm not worried about Israel and its future. I think Israel is strong. Israel would survive, and is doing very good.
Okay. So in a way, are you suggesting that the message that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been spreading for years and years now, that there's a Holocaust about to occur because the West is permitting Iran to get a nuclear weapon, is it in some way overstated on his part?
I think so. I think that there is no room to equate the Israeli condition with the Holocaust. No way. I mean, Israel has been threatened. He's under some threats, and we did discuss all the other problems facing Israel. But there is nothing to be compared with the Holocaust. Israel has strong army, determined people.
But I don't want to in any way mislead in terms of what I meant referring to Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's not that he says it would be a Holocaust, but that in essence, he is saying that a nuclear Iran would pose an enormous threat, A, to the state of Israel, as well as to the United States, because he keeps talking about interballistic missiles, and the only reason to have them is to put a nuclear weapon on them and fire them at the United States. But there is this suggestion that Iran has said through the Ayatollah that it wants to wipe Israel off the map, and that the way it would do that is if it had a nuclear weapon. And what Benjamin Netanyahu has done is he equated present-day Iran with 1938 Germany. The only difference is Hitler did not have a nuclear weapon, and Benjamin Netanyahu is suggesting that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, as lunatic as Nazi Germany was, so is Iran ready to, it is not worried about what would happen to it. It's not worried about the reprisals it would suffer. It would give up 1 million of its people if giving those people up meant wiping Israel off the face of the earth. So that in the American Jewish experience, there's real anxiety about Israel's literal existence were Iran ever to get a nuclear weapon. And I'm asking you whether in some way the American people have been misled, or in some way Benjamin Netanyahu is crying wolf, where warning against Iran might be warranted, but he is overstating the case.
Well, there were and still are Iranian leaders at various levels who are they don't like Israel. They hate Israel. They don't want to see Israel existing. They said that Israel should be whipped up of the world map, which means basically, if you translate it into simple language, we want to get rid of Israel. But having said that, the Iranians would not dare using nuclear weapons, because they know that it would be the end of Iran. Israel is strong, has a lot of capabilities, and I don't think that the world would allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. I'm not sure they want to assemble a bomb, but they are already on the verge of doing it. To the credit of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I would say that he alerted the world to the danger of Iran, and therefore, after long hesitation and looking the other way, with closed eyes, the world woke up, and especially the United States, and started imposing sanctions on Iran. The sanctions were very useful. On top of that, the Israeli intelligence was very active in sabotaging and slowing down the Iranian program. And therefore, Netanyahu was right about it, by also conducting his own psychological warfare. Hold me. If you don't do anything, it would be us who would strike Iran. But on the other hand, I don't think that he has to go the extra mileage of saying we are now on the eve of the Second World War, and Hitler and Germany and Nazi Germany. But I'm not underestimating the danger of Iran.
Okay.
I don't want to be misunderstood.
You say it well. You said Iran is one of the threats at the moment Israel has to deal with. What's the second or third?
Well, Iran is maybe the greater threat, the biggest threat.
Okay.
Well, look, the civil war in Syria, okay? It's really terrible. I mean, 150,000 Syrians were killed. Nearly half of the Syrian population, half of 20-something million people are homeless or refugees in neighboring countries: Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq. And the war is silent. The regime used chemical weapons, denying that they had it, and then admitted to get rid under pressure. The war is spilling over not to Israel, but to the border with Israel. Now the border area, which is a 100-kilometer strip in the Golan Heights, is controlled not by the Syrian army, and even not by the good opposition rebels, but by the Islamists, by the jihadists. Though, I can give you one example. Just recently, the rebels took over a very important strategic hill overlooking Israel, on the Syrian side of the border. And they killed the Syrian military army there, captured them as prisoners, and then they waved a banner with paying respect to Osama bin Laden, who is their idol. They admire him. And so this is a great danger, because once the war would be over in Syria, the civil war, these Islamists would turn against, they would be looking for a new enemy. At the moment, the Assad regime is the enemy. But once the war is over, or God forbid they would take control of Syria, then they would turn their guns and bombs against Israel. So it is a situation which the Israeli military and intelligence is closely observing and monitoring. So far, there were very small incidents. The war practically did not spill over to Israel. But it is a danger. By the way, the world is silent and is doing nothing. It's a humanitarian crisis, unheard of. And Israel is contributing its little bit to solve the problem. So far, the Israeli military, but also Israeli hospitals, built a field hospital at the border, and we are treating civilian and military personnel that are crossing the border and asking for Israeli medical help, and Israel is providing it.
So Yossi, you described this Islamic presence on the border between Israel and Syria. Is there anything Israel can do about that now? Is there anything Israel should be doing about that now?
Well, what Israel is doing is very good, offering humanitarian aid, assistance. I don't think that Israel should get involved in the Syrian civil war, but I in one of the interviews I gave in Israel, I said, as Jews, as people who suffered, I don't think we should stay idle and do nothing in face of the humanitarian crisis. And I suggested that maybe if the world is silent, Israel would declare a no-fly zone and would forbid the Syrian regime to use its air force to attack civilians in Syria, its own people. Because the strength of the Assad forces is mainly in the air. Mm-hmm. They have air power superiority. The rebels don't have any air force. And they are throwing a lot of bombs from the air. They are dropping bombs and killing a lot of civilians. So I thought Israel should, send a signal to the world: we cannot stand by, and something has to be done. If you, the world, don't at least declare a no-fly zone, we will do it. And I think the Syrian regime is so weak and has so many enemies that he wouldn't like to open a new front against another enemy.
Are you critical of the United States for not doing anything?
Oh, very much so.
What would you have America do?
Well, first of all, just coming to the studio, I read that Secretary of State John Kerry just recently admitted that it was wrong that the U.S. not did something. He said, we wasted a year. They should have declared no-fly zone. They should have supported and provided weapons to the secular good elements among the opposition forces in Syria.
Is it possible to separate it that way?
Absolutely. Of course, I mean, to a certain degree, you can control it. There might be a spillover of weapons to the Islamists, but if you control it in a thorough way, I think you can, because what we see at the moment is that the Free Syrian Army, which is used to be the main rebel force, is disintegrating, and the Islamists, the jihadists, they have a great sense to look for loopholes, to manipulate voids. And when they saw a void, they moved in. And now they are the strongest force, the stronger force in Syria.
All right, so in addition to Iran, we have the issue of what will happen, especially if there's an Islamic presence at the end of this Syrian civil war.
There is already.
I understand. But what you're saying is it could pose
Yes.
a serious military problem for Israel.
Absolutely.
Okay, what's a third problem?
Egypt, on our southern border. Thanks God, the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt signed in 78 and 9 is still holding, despite the regime changes in Egypt. But Sinai has turned into a kind of a Wild West, no man's land. First and utmost, it is affecting the Egyptian state. It is affecting their economy, because Sinai and its Red Sea Strip was a source of income from tourism for Egypt. Now tourists don't go there, neither Israelis nor Europeans and others. And secondly, you have a strong presence of Islamists in Sinai, and it's very close to the Israeli border. It's on the Israeli border. Occasionally, they fire rockets in the direction of Israel, the city of Eilat on the Red Sea, and to the Jordanian side of the border, and the port of Aqaba. But they are fighting once again against the Egyptian army, the Egyptian government in Cairo, but also already turning against Israel. So this is another important dangerous situation. I must say also, to the credit of the new Egyptian government, the government which was not supported and still is not supported by the Obama administration, that they are really serious to whip out the terrorists. I'm not sure they would succeed, but they are showing a great determination to fight these Al-Qaeda elements in Sinai.
Speak to that one more moment in a larger context. To what extent is the real conflict at the moment a conflict of civilizations between the extreme element of the Islamic community, the Islamic jihadists, and basically Western civilization? And the reason I ask you is the United States continues to sort of be ambivalent about the way it expresses the conflict. There are many people in the United States who feel that if you try to identify the conflict as a conflict with Islam in any way, that you're being racist, and that therefore there's a tendency to try not to use the word jihad, not to use the word of Islamic extremists when you describe the conflict. There are others who feel that the reality is that while again the percentage of people in the Muslim world who are Islamic extremists is relatively small in absolute numbers, since we're starting with, when you start in the billions, you are talking about any percentage is going to be in the millions, that there is a significant portion of the Islamic world which is radicalized, and which the jihad movement in a militaristic sense and the Al-Qaeda related groups are the real threat still to the West, to the United States, to the State of Israel, and to Western Europe. You've now identified an Islamic group on the border of Syria. You've now identified an Islamic group in the Sinai that is having conflicts with Egypt, to what extent do you and the people you speak to identify Islamic extremism as the major driving force for terrorism and conflict in the world today?
Well, there is no doubt that these. First of all, I dare use the term jihad because they use it. They call it a holy war. It is their parlance and language. So I don't think there is nothing wrong to say they are jihadist and radical Islamist. It's not politically correct to say it.
Yes, I understand.
And even if one shouldn't say it because of political correctness, I would say yes, there are elements in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, which are posing a great danger. First of all, to their own societies. First of all, to the Arab world and to the Muslim countries where they have been cultivated. Secondly, they pose a threat to other elements in the Middle East, to Israel, and maybe other countries, and then to Western Europe. I mean, once again, the Western Europeans are becoming very much aware. They are introducing immigration laws to reduce the number of foreigners arriving at their shores, mainly from the Middle East and African countries. So there is, I don't know if there is a clash of civilizations, but there is a strong tendency among the Muslim extremists to resort to terrorist means, and sometimes very terrible measures. And they are not the Islamists are not the only terrorist group operating in the world, but I would say that among the 100 or so guerrilla and terrorist groups that are on the blacklist of the State Department and other countries, predominantly these are Muslim radicals.
Okay. So we've identified Iran, Syria, Egypt. Is there a fourth you want to mention?
Well, Lebanon and Hezbollah.
Okay. I want to know why you haven't mentioned the Palestinian conflict. And it's interesting to me. Yossi, does this indicate that from your perspective, while there are serious threats that Israel must be aware of, even if they're not impending at the moment, when you do catalog in your own mind the most serious threats to the state of Israel, the Palestinian conflict is not in the top 4?
No, I'm glad that you mentioned it, because I don't see the Palestinian issue in the short term as posing a threat to Israel, and certainly not a military threat. But if we don't solve the problem with the Palestinians, practically if we don't have any peace agreement or any sort of an agreement with Palestinians, then Israel would be in deep troubles, because it would turn into a domestic problem. It's not an external problem like we have on our borders with the Islamists in Egypt, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, but it's an internal problem. There are more than 1 million Israeli Arabs. They enjoy full citizenship, full rights in the state of Israel, but they identified with their Palestinian brothers. They sympathize with them. And then you have probably nearly 2 million Palestinians in the small enclave of Gaza. It's one big shanty town, if you wish. And then you have another 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank. And eventually they would outnumber Jews, and they would pose a problem for the Jewish democratic identity of the State of Israel, as it is defined in our Declaration of Independence. So I left it as a last item on our agenda, but maybe it is the most important one. While the other crises are imposing military threats to Israel, they maybe threaten I don't think the existence of Israel, but can cause troubles for Israel in the future. The Palestinian problem is at the core of our existence.
And Yossi, do you have your suggested way of dealing with this problem, of resolving it?
Well, it's a tragedy that... no, I don't have a...
Isn't that the tragedy?
I don't have a crystal ball,
right.
but it's a tragedy that
People
leaders...
who care terribly don't have good answers right now.
Because the leaders on both sides, but especially on the Palestinian side, don't have the guts and the determination to make tough decisions and to reach a compromise. You have to reach a compromise. There is no other way. If you don't compromise, you will continue with the status quo. And the status quo is not good, neither for the Palestinians. They suffer. They live in poverty, especially in Gaza. They are neglected by their own leaders and by the Arab world, who does not care about them. Had the Arab world wanted the Palestinian problem to be solved, they could have solved it overnight by providing financial support to build houses and to cater for the Palestinians. But if the problem is not solved, it would be on our doorstep. So even if you need two for tango, I would say it's an Israeli almost ultimate interest to try to negotiate and solve the problem. It's not that we did not negotiate with them, but sometimes you should compromise.
Mm-hmm. Is there a negotiation or a compromise that you wish the Israeli government had made, which it did not make?
Yes.
Give me an example.
Every Israeli knows, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, deep in his heart, that the two-state solution is the only conceivable, possible solution. And you have to draw borders. Okay, maybe 1 meter here, 1 meter there, but that's not. I wouldn't fight for a few more square kilometers. It's better to have peace and solution, and therefore this two-state solution is the only. These are the only cards on the table, and I think the two sides have to compromise. And even if it would cause Israel to take some harsh decisions, even to dismantle some of the settlements, I think it's worth doing it.
Okay, and you're willing to give up some of Jerusalem?
I think you don't have to divide Jerusalem again.
Why not?
Why not? Because
Yes.
you can find a solution, which was already offered to the Palestinians. Unfortunately, their previous leader Yasser Arafat didn't want to accept it because he didn't. I think that Arafat was a problem. He was the solution, but also he was the problem. He, deep in his heart, he didn't want to recognize the state of Israel to exist, although he did recognize it officially. And therefore, he was not ready to settle for a compromise over Jerusalem. But there are, wise people can come with good solutions how to square the round. Okay. That Jerusalem would remain undivided, would be the capital of the two nations, and still remain under Israeli control.
If you could have peace, Yossi,
yes.
But it would mean giving up a piece of Jerusalem and giving up Israeli sovereignty over East Jerusalem, would you do it?
When you say Jerusalem, it's a big place.
I know.
Do we need the Palestinian villages that had been annexed to Jerusalem, to eastern Palestinian villages that were annexed to Jerusalem? I would say no. No. So yes, you can give some parts of Jerusalem. You don't give the Wailing Wall. You don't give the Kotel. You don't give the Jewish Quarter. You don't give the whole city. But beyond that, you can compromise.
Okay, I think you're absolutely right. I still haven't heard, though, what compromise you would have wished Israel to make so far that it hasn't made. Do you look at it as an Israeli and say to yourself, if I were the Prime Minister of Israel, I would have done 1, 2, 3 right now, today. I would do 1, 2. I would stop all settlement growth. I would stop construction at the moment.
All Yeah, well, not beyond the existing communities.
You permit what's called vertical building, meaning inside a given
Yes.
community, but you would not extend the borders of that
Yeah,
community.
taking into consideration the growth, the birth rate, and so on. You have to provide housing for new families, but I wouldn't extend them. I wouldn't put settlements which would eventually would block any hope for agreement in the future. And there are some Israelis, there are some politicians who would like to do it because they have their own vision of an ideology. I think that you should use the West Bank as a pawn, as a card, as a bargaining chip, to try to at the end to negotiate and to get the best bargaining possible.
Okay, I want to ask one last question,
Yes.
and then before we end, I do want to ask you an intelligence-related question.
Right.
There are those who say, here's the problem, Yossi. There is within the Palestinian world, and it right now reflects Palestinian leadership, that really doesn't matter what Israel does. There's a much bigger overarching problem that the Palestinian world and Palestinian leadership does not want to recognize the existence of a Jewish state in Israel and really doesn't want to live side by side with Israel. And therefore, anything you do, while it might make you feel better, while it might be better for world opinion, for Israel, for example, to stop all settlement growth, if you stopped every settlement, nobody picked up a hammer, nobody, there was no bulldozer anywhere in the region, it wouldn't matter. Because that the ultimate problem is not a problem of settlements, not a problem of borders, it's a problem of whether the other side wants to really live in partnership, sharing the land. The Jew has always said, we want it all, but we'll share the land because there are two peoples here. And it seems to me that the Palestinians have said from any time that they've had a chance to share the land, their answer has been, we don't want to share the land because it's all ours. And you Jew, you came here and took our land. And as long as that's the problem, any detail really pales and has no larger effect on compromise. And I want to make sure you understand me. I think Israel should do everything possible right now, not only because it affects world opinion, but because it's the right Jewish thing to do, to make every gesture imaginable that says to the Palestinian people, we want to live side by side with you. At the same time, I have not yet been convinced that there is a real Palestinian, Arab, Islamic mentality which says, we will share the land. And I want to know what you feel.
I would say the following. First of all, the Palestinian people are not homogeneous. They are divided, they have their own radicals, zealots, but also moderate forces. And maybe the choices facing Israel are not between good and bad, but between good and maybe better. So you have to settle for what you have. There are Palestinians who are seriously interested in living side by side in peace with Israel. Not maybe having great partnership, but at least accepting Israel as a state, as a nation. Secondly, I would say that even if the problem, historically speaking, the Palestinians are to be blamed for saying no time after another, time and time again, to every almost international solution that was offered them from 1947 to 2004. But still, because they are our neighbors, and even if we think they are bad neighbors, we have to live next to them. And therefore we have to do, as you said, every imaginable gesture possible. And then my second argument would be, let's try. We are not abandoning our arms. We are not giving back anything we possess. Let's try. You can find a solution that would go, let's move stage by stage, slowly.
Okay, I want to shift topics with you, and I appreciated your willingness to sort of give us, an overview of what the problems are facing Israel, and also to talk to me about the Palestinian conflict. But you're an expert as well in Israeli intelligence, the history of Israeli intelligence. I have one overarching question for you, and then some quick specific questions. The overarching question is, how good is Israeli intelligence really, Yossi? And the reason I say that is, they didn't see the Yom Kippur War coming. They seem to be telling the United States and the world that there were weapons of mass destruction before the United States went into, with a coalition, went into Iraq. So they were wrong in 73. They were wrong in Iraq. They didn't see the Intifada coming. I want to know the extent to which the Israeli image of having an exceptional intelligence apparatus, is it legitimate? Is it overstated?
No, it's not overstated.
Good.
As we describe in our book, Spies Against Armageddon, we don't say that the Israeli spies, Israeli intelligence community is perfect. Nobody's perfect. They are not flawless. They made mistakes. You pointed out, rightly so, Mark, that in 73, they had the information, but they wrongly analyzed it. The second example, I would not blame Israel for the invasion of Iraq. Israel did not say that Saddam Hussein's Iraq had nuclear weapons. The Bush administration, the U.S. wanted to go into that war, and they went it, regardless what was the Israeli analysis. Saddam Hussein was very dangerous, but at the same time, I think everyone now accepts that it was a wrong decision. I would say instead of invading Iran, United States should have invaded Iran or should attacked Iran. And indeed, the Iranians were very, very worried that they would be next in line. So the Israeli intelligence is good. I would rank him among the 5-6 best intelligence organizations in the world because of the Israeli condition.
Mm-hmm. Now, a subtle question, and I really was anxious to hear you talk about something again that you hear all the time within the American Jewish community. We have seen a series of Israeli films produced in the last few years, which seem to suggest that the people who run Israeli intelligence have grave misgivings about what Israel is doing as it deals with the Arab world in general and the Palestinian people in particular. The movie that got a lot of attention called
Gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers, exactly right.
It was a documentary.
Yes, a documentary. And I'm not sure that, well, you know, Yossi, a documentary can be shaped any way you want. I would love to have been able to interview myself some of the individuals who were the featured figures in the documentary, and I would have loved to have interviewed Carmi Guillon and things like that. But the entire, starting with the bus incident and then going through, there was a suggestion that Israeli intelligence experts go into Israeli intelligence with one mindset and come out with a different mindset. That they come out having moved to the left, and that within the Israeli intelligence community, there is criticism of Israeli policy and of Israeli politicians. I want your take on that image and the sense to which you feel that there is real criticism after the fact expressed by people who have had major positions in Israeli intelligence and then somehow move in and become more critical of Israeli policy.
My reaction, I saw the Gatekeepers. It's a documentary in which the last six former heads of the Israeli domestic intelligence service, the Shin Bet, the security service, were interviewed and reflected on about their terms and the situation. My comment is, where have you been? If this is what you think, why did not you implement or at least advise the political level, the political echelon, your bosses, the prime minister, the defense minister, what approach to take. And
Although the suggestion was that politicians weren't listening.
That's true. Politicians are not listening, even to good advice. Certainly, sometimes they listen only to bad advices given to them. But that was my take on the film. I saw it. There were scenes that I didn't like, or sentences that I didn't like. But above all, from a overall point of view, I would say, if this is your opinions, and I don't think that you change that much, that you moved to the job with one perception and then you came out with another. Maybe it was you changed it a little bit. Why didn't you do it in the first place? But it, in a way, it's like soldiers, that are very enthusiastic about going into action, into the war, and then they realize that the war is terrible.
That's a very good point. That happens to many, many people. And when you see war, it does change you.
Absolutely.
Yes. Are you critical of Israeli intelligence in terms of their operations, in terms of the extent to which they will, in some way, brutalize the Palestinian people, or they engage in forms of torture which upset you?
Yes, in the past, yes. But, and Israel adopted a lot of methods which were highly criticized, harsh methods in the 80s and the 90s, including by the United States and UK and other countries. And in retrospect, you say it is a hypocritical approach because exactly the same, even worse methods enhance interrogation. What does it mean? It's torture, right?
Correct.
So you launder words.
Yes.
But it's a torture. And United States, the UK, when they faced terrorists, they used exactly the same methods, maybe even more harsh measures. And therefore, the Israeli society is a strong society, is a soul-searching society. So when such cases of torture were revealed and exposed, Israel set its own investigation committees and changed the rules. Mm-hmm. I would say that now the Israeli security services are equipped better than almost any other intelligence service in the world to deal with terrorists. And if you talk to intelligence people, they say if you use torture, it means you failed as a professional. Therefore, I think the methods used by the Israeli intelligence are much, much softer than those who have been used by the United States in the war against Al-Qaeda.
Are you proud of the Israeli intelligence community?
I'm not a member of the intelligence community. I never served in the intelligence community. I served in a special forces unit.
But you know what I mean.
As a writer, as an analyst, as a commentator, as an Israeli, yes, I'm very proud.
Okay. One more question before we have to end, and I could talk to you for hours. In Spies Against Armageddon, you and Dan wrote a fabulous chapter on Jonathan Pollard. You described the entire, you took us in, how he even tried to get into the Israeli consulate when he realized that he was about to be captured by the American government. And it's a fascinating story. It is much more detailed than most Americans understand and most American Jews understand it. And before anybody decides whether Pollard should or should not be given some kind of clemency or pardon.
He should.
Wait.
He should.
They should read your chapter. Now let me ask you, what should happen to Pollard now?
First of all, I think the state of Israel betrayed Pollard. They abandoned him. Not when he wanted to enter the Israeli embassy, but when Israel apologized and cooperated with the American authorities. And Israel apologized and said we would dismantle the unit which operated him. Now, as you know, in minor criminal cases, any lawyer that is defending his client would go to the authorities, to the police, and would say, if you want to gain the cooperation of my client, let's have a deal. Israel cooperated and didn't attach any strings to the case. And therefore, he was punished severely, more than he deserved. He deserved to be punished because he was a spy, he betrayed his country. But Israel betrayed him by doing it. And now I think, but later on Israel corrected. The Israeli politicians, government corrected their approach, and they started lobbying the U.S. administrations, the Congress, the public to release Pollard or to provide him clemency. I think it's what the U.S. is doing to Pollard is pure revenge. There is no reason to hold him anymore in prison. He's sick. He has been punished already, and he should be released. And it's just pure vendetta, led by the U.S. intelligence community and above all the Navy, where he served, and the FBI.
Yossi Melman, it is wonderful speaking to you. You bring a marvelous balance to issues that are very complicated, and I think you've helped me, you've helped the American audience, you've helped Shalom TV, you've helped anybody watching you right now have a more sophisticated understanding of the complexities that the State of Israel has to deal with in many, many, many ways. You're a lovely human being. It's been a joy meeting you. And I hope when you're in the United States again, you'll come join me. I'm really not done with you. So we'll put a semicolon here if you don't mind.
I promise.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. My conversation with Israeli journalist and author Yossi Melman, whose book, co-written with Dan Raviv, is called Spies Against Armageddon. It's a marvelous read. If you start it, you will not want to put it down. As always, I ask you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything you've heard Yossi say or me say here on LChayim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. LChayim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
LChayim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.